to Euromonitor International's Cannabis podcast series. My name is Jurgita Bicheka and I'm a commercial director here at Euromonitor. Today, our global lead for nicotine and cannabis industries, Shane MacGuill, and sales director for public sector in North America, Eric Solka, will discuss the transition of cannabis industry from illegal to legal, impact of regulatory landscape on the success of this transition, and implications on businesses and consumers. Eric, in 2016, there was so much celebration when California voters approved Proposition 64, legalizing recreational marijuana, which signaled the acceptance of the industry and promised gains to state and the end of the illegal market. Today, however, leading California cannabis companies warn that they are on the verge of collapse, as most local governments have been reluctant to approve retail sales outlet, and producers say that taxes are eating them alive. According to the letter by retailers and cannabis producers, 75% of cannabis markets in California is still unsafe and illegal. So what does the current regulation signal to the producers, retailers, and consumers?
Yeah, California started out roughly as a pioneer in a legalization state, has now become the poster child of basically what not to do. The challenges that are facing businesses now with overtaxation and oversupply are strangling businesses' profitability and causing a dispensary to close across the state. They estimate that about 70% of the $12 billion cannabis market in California is illicit sales based on $3 billion that is legal. The challenges that organizations and manufacturing cultivators all the way down to the dispensaries face is that 50% of all products sold in California in a dispensary is tax. They're unable to meet the ends meet basically on their business. On top of that, there is a cultivation tax that just increased for January of 2022. This is bringing the cost for a pound of marijuana, basically 50% of the cost of a $300 per pound of cannabis is taxed. So you have tax at the cultivation side, you have a 50% tax applied at the retail side. And then at the end of the year, there is a hefty federal tax for those businesses, which is really causing the strangle and the challenges and the push for more regulation, policy reform and tax reform for the industry.
Thank you. Well, Shane, we keep hearing about legal cannabis industry acceptance. How is this reflected in how consumers purchase products?
Well, I think when we talk about acceptance, some of the ways that that's demonstrated or manifested in the consumer behavior, things like broader product ranges, so more adventurism when it comes to the formats that consumers are willing to use. And again, we're seeing that in the US very clearly. I know we're going to talk about some of the regulatory issues in the Californian market in this podcast, but if you look in parts of California, there are many dispensaries there where things like extracted formats like vapor run to maybe 75%, 85% of the sales of the individual outlet, which is, runs against the majority of cannabis consumption historically, traditionally, and currently today in legal states. But that's an example, I think, of, as you get a wider understanding of the industry, wider acceptance among consumers, we get more diverse product portfolios. We also see it in the demographics of cannabis consumers in the US. So again, one of the fastest growing demographics in the US is baby boomers. They can be either consumers who used cannabis in their misspent youths and are returning to it, or perhaps are looking at what cannabinoid products can offer them now in terms of managing some of those conditions of aging that they have, etc. And deciding that with that acceptance, with that education around the product base comes greater a desire to consume more. And then we also see things like soft normalization. So the US and North America is quite far advanced in terms of where we see the use of cannabis sitting in terms of acceptance by society. In other markets, we see, maybe things happening at a slightly slower pace. We have to look a bit deeper or harder for examples of normalization, but we do see it. I mean, again, in this part of the world where I sit in the United Kingdom, we saw a pharmacy VPC chain launching the other day their own cannabinoid infused product range with no THC, of course, but again, kind of co-opting that iconography of traditional cannabis use and so on. So, we begin to see those conversations, those manifestations of acceptance happening more and more within societies.
Oh, well, thank you, Shane. Eric, what role does regulatory environment play on the successful developments of this industry?
Well, I think we're coming to realize here in the U.S. that it plays a big role on how the way they view the industry. The biggest challenge I think that the U.S. has overall is that it's still handled at the state level, and it's a state decision to go legal. And there's no current federal involvement in the industry at this time. What that causes is these kind of micro industries across each state based on how that state is running the industry. So for California, again, for an example, they do face an oversupply issue. They have businesses and private equity companies that are coming in and finding loopholes in Prop 64 to link acreages together to build these massive farm businesses that are all covered under Prop 64, the first version, which also is being asked by the industry to be looked at and reformed. This basically causes an oversupply, which again, because it's a state-ran program, these companies cannot go across state lines to sell product in more demanding markets. It has to sit within California. This is becoming an interesting twist within the cannabis state of California because of the fact that legal companies are working to kind of sell some of their leftover product in the illicit market to help fund their legal business. This is becoming very popular where they are using the illicit market to sell product in order to stay profitable on the legal side, and something that is currently being addressed in more cause for policy reform. I think what's also happening now is they're seeing a rise in cartels coming back to owning more of the market share of illicit, which they haven't seen before. Before, a lot of the illicit market was sold in Mendocino County and up north in Humboldt County, where they were individual farmers that were supplying the market. A lot of those farmers had converted to legal, giving more room for cartels to come in and win back that illicit market. And customers don't have a lot of risk now of going back to the illicit market. They're paying 50 to 60% less for cannabis, and there's because of the laws in the state, there's not a lot of risk for taking on and purchasing illegal cannabis at this time. This is causing mass operators to consider doing business in the state, possibly leaving the state for more well-run states like Massachusetts or Illinois, where there's more profitability opportunities there and less saturation, which is something that is giving, again, California legislatures something to think about in 2022.
Okay, so while it's obvious regulation is critical for the industry's success, Shane, what else besides it impacts industry's transition from illegal to legal, and what would encourage more consumers choose legal products besides just price?
Yeah, well, before I answer the question, I think I just want to reiterate the premise of the question, because really, and as we just heard from Eric, the two key factors above any others in terms of that transition from illegal to legal really are regulatory environment and price. And, price is often a function, as we've heard, of the taxation regime that's involved. So, the two of those are kind of key because they throttle, that migration that can happen between the two categories. Otherwise, there are other factors, though, that do go into people's decisions about whether to purchase in a black market or in the legal market. Some of those relate to kind of the dynamism of the propositions in the illicit market. Often, and it is changing again, as we've heard in terms of US states and so on, but often the product landscape, the kind of even brand offerings that the consumers have been able to access in the illicit market are much more appealing, more dynamic. Sometimes because of regulation as well. In Canada, for example, we've got restrictions on potency, we had restrictions on format, etc., which meant that consumers were staying in the illicit market because the product set is just more appealing and better. In certain cases, we have this issue around perceptions of authenticity and kind of consumer inertia. So if you have a consumer who's always traditionally purchased in the black market, again, because of the dynamism of the propositions I've just mentioned, may have particular brands or product sets that they gravitate around. They may not want to transition. They may be skeptical of moving into a legal market where product quality is often an issue, where there are perceptions of things like big weed, certainly in Canada, again, with the licensed producers, that can often be seen very disparagingly amongst existing, legacy consumers or consumers in the legacy market. So, from a legal industry point of view, anything you can do to kind of address that, to communicate in an authentic way, to ensure that your product quality is there, I guess maybe to infuse your brands and your company corporate activity with real purpose. That's something that's often talked about in the legal industry is the idea of social justice, sustainability, etc. So those can be used as levers, I think, to bring people across from the illicit market. And then just finally, distribution. I think it's something that we haven't touched on here. It's been an issue in California as well as other markets where simply people find it difficult to get access to legal weed. They often have to drive quite a long way to find their nearest dispensary. We still, even in legal states, have districts that can ban stores and dispensaries from opening in their areas. And that's an issue in terms of trying to persuade people to come across from the illicit market. It's just ease of access to product as well.
Shane, to wrap up our conversation, what are the lessons for regulatory bodies in other countries, for example, Germany, that is considering legalizing industry in the near future, and how businesses can be prepared for it or maybe impacted?
Yeah, so I think at a higher level, the most important thing to me is to think about the purpose of legalization. I know that might sound a little bit strange, but there are different outcomes that you can want to achieve from legalization. You can want to achieve control and depress cannabis use that's already existing. You can want to broadly allow cannabis use, but make sure that it's restricted in terms of youth access. You can want to just raise tax revenue, as we just heard from Eric. You can want to use cannabis legalization as a means of economic development and use it as an economic growth driver within your market, etc. And of course, you can do many or all of those things at the same time as well. But I think, governments, societies, regulators should be clear, firstly, around what the purpose of the legalization is. And then when you have set that out, then you can look at, what framework will achieve, some or all of those goals that you're looking to achieve. And then it becomes kind of this Goldilocks principle of, having a balanced regulation that's perhaps, not too restrictive or, too highly taxed or too onerous, that we get some of the issues that Eric has outlined in terms of some of the states in the US, and not too loose or liberal as well, that you have some of the other maybe unintended consequences of the legalization. So, taking a step back and understanding exactly what you want to achieve from your legalization process is important as well. There are many examples here, and governments and regulators will have many examples of things, fallout from taxation rates and so on. So I think, as we see more and more legalization, we will see regulatory bodies getting better at cannabis legalization, so to speak, because we'll have some of these examples, both good and bad, that have gone before. And, as we get more, we'll have a larger body to work from, I guess. I'll also say don't underestimate the importance of some of those less maybe headline grabbing or less glamorous aspects of frameworks. Things like distribution make a huge difference in terms of whether legalization is a success or not, purely seen through that lens of whether people are coming across in the illicit market. You need to make sure that you set up a framework, not just where the products are right, you're regulating the product features, you've got the tax right, but also that people can access, etc. So, it's a broad mix of things. You need to balance many different kind of stakeholder interests, but broadly speaking, I think if you attribute or use that principle of nothing too strict, nothing too liberal, you'll probably land in the right place.
Well, thank you, Shane, and thank you, Eric. And of course, Euromonitor can help companies, businesses, governments, as we've been extensively researching cannabis industry for more than half a decade already, combining multiple research methods and supporting them with insights and analysis, running annual surveys to explore consumer preferences and habits across both cannabis and CBD products, and also sizing the CBD, adult use, medical, and illicit markets in value and volume terms. Please contact us on www.euromonitor.com for more information on our cannabis research. An extended version of this conversation is available for our Passport subscribers. Please contact us for more information. Thank you.